Welcome to the guide, Exile. Have you just had an itch lately? A burning one to make a spicy build? Perhaps one with some juicy balls and ignites. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of fiery balls, and now you could be one too with this igniting, fiery, searing balls of a Fireball Ignite Elementalist. Alright, okay, the name may need some work, but boy, do we use a lot of fire. As stated somewhere in that convoluted title, this build is based around Fireball as our catalyst to apply fat ignites to enemies. Yes, you hear me right, we are scaling ignites. What a time to be alive. With 3.3, Ignite receives some buffs, mainly in the form of numerics and its base damage and correlating modifiers in the passive tree and gems. These buffs have been just enough of what Ignite needed to become competitive and to complete endgame content. With Ignite, we want to apply one big Ignite since we cannot naturally stack them. This means we want as big of a base hit that we can get, and Fireball provides a very large base damage, as well as a juicy more multiplier to our Ignites, and is a projectile that we can send flying off screen to kill enemies. On top of being a projectile that we can throw across the screen, we also get elemental proliferation with Elementalist that allows our fat Ignites to naturally spread to nearby enemies. This brings a very satisfying result of packs of enemies burning to ash once a single monster is hit with an Ignite, making for very solid map clearing. Now when we get to bosses, we actually have a lot of options for supporting damage, and while it may not be top tier boss deletion, we are able to easily take down most all bosses in the game. Since we are Ignite and damage over time focused, this means that there are a lot of stats and multipliers that do not apply to our damage or give us little effectiveness. So for example, cast speed is of very little use to us with Ignites since we can only apply one. We also do not benefit from upfront modifiers such as spell damage, projectile damage, area damage, or elemental penetration. However, we do benefit from fire or elemental damage, generic damage, damage over time, burning damage, and of course Ignite multipliers. So this means that there are many modifiers that we do not want to overinvest into or even get. Another side effect of being damage over time focused, as well as having very slow cast speed, we are unable to abuse resource recovery like in the Poison Quill Rain Assassin, so we instead have to play smart and look to make use of flasks, regeneration, and other various recovery methods. Luckily for us, this build is great in that you can make use of many different gearing options for you to make it your own and choose your own defensive style that fits you. With the basics of this build out of the way, it's time for us to get on into this igniting fiery, searing balls of a Fireball Ignite Elementalist. Did that sound right? This Ignite Fireball Elementalist is quite the fun character to play, and really brought me back to the days of when double dipping reigned king of DPS charts. Now we don't have as much damage as then, but we certainly have enough to make it a very satisfying character. To make this build feel good, you will have to invest some currency, but like most of my builds, it's completely affordable to the average player. I spent somewhere around 6 to 7 exalts on the current gear for this character, but it can be started on even less, somewhere around 2 to 3 exalts, and perform just as well in all mapping scenarios, but it will need the boost to complete high tier map bosses such as Guardians. Best of all, I am using a corrupted tabula as my chest. Well, that may or may not be good depending on your view of things. Offensively, we're relying on thick ignites applied by Fireball. As mentioned previously, Fireball provides a very high base damage, range, and more multiplier to ignites. It is also a very satisfying and classic skill to play. As the Elementalist, we also get a passive elemental proliferation, allowing us to spread our ignites, chills, and shocks to enemies and maps, providing a very nice clearing support. Since critical strikes do not scale our damage over time without perfect agony, we will be going for Elemental Overload, for another elemental more multiplier. Now ignites do not benefit from elemental penetration, however they still benefit from reduced elemental resistances. As we are using a slow hitting projectile, elemental equilibrium can be easily used to gain more damage. Using EE means that we cannot have any added fire damage to our attacks or spells, since we do not want to be triggering our fire resistance whilst casting or attacking. Instead, we look to get lightning or cold damage added to attacks on at least one item, so we can use shield charge to trigger EE in maps, going through packs after we ignite them with the Fireball, and then using Orb of Storms for sustained boss fights. Orb of Storms also provides a very easy method for applying shocks and proccing Elemental Overload on bosses. Speaking of shocks, we also get 23% shocks on all enemies since we are Elementalist with some shock scaling from passives. Finally, for bosses, we can make use of a 5+ linked Scorching Ray in our helmet slot for even more boss damage. We are scaling fire and damage over time, so Scorching Ray not only deals a lot of damage by itself, but its fire resistance debuff enhances our Fireball Ignite damage. Defensively, we are no thick jug, but we do get by. We take Mind Over Matter to increase our effective health pool to over 7,000 effective life, and with the Elementalist we are able to get minor life leech, while not useful against bosses, can be very nice for sustain and maps with our lower upfront damage, since we hit so many enemies. We also get a very fast shield charge with Fortify for mobility, dodging, and reduced damage taken, an Immortal Call setup with Cold Snap Chills to slow enemies' action speed, Enfeeble to reduce their damage, and Tempest Shield to buff our block chance. We also get a fair amount of life and mana regen for more passive sustain. Finally, with our Flasks, we get some armor, block, and regeneration. For mapping, we can make use of a Bright Beak and Shield Charge to zip around maps, throwing out a set of searing balls each pack, and then subsequently charging through them to trigger our Fortify and Elemental Equilibrium. You do not need to use Orb of Storms or Scorching Ray unless you come across a very tanky enemy or map modifiers. And of course, with the new Vol rework, you can pop off a Vol Fireball every few packs and just keep shield charging. For bossing, you can make use of a gem swap to a powerful single projectile. Place down an Orb of Storms on the boss, hit it with the Fireball, and then cast Scorching Ray. Now if the fight is quite hectic, you do not need to use Scorching Ray and can let the Fireball Ignites do their work, reapplying the Ignite every few seconds while you dodge around. The passive trees and Path of Building Pastebin are included in the description. Some pros of the build. It's a very fun all-around character. It has very great mapping speeds, and it also has space for Magic Find. Ignite's able to kill bosses again. Elemental Ailments and Proliferation are a visual treat to the eyes. Some cons. It's a damage over time build, so we cannot easily abuse recovery mechanics such as Leech. This means that more mechanical play and proper flask usage is required. The Ignite damage ceiling is still much lower than traditional upfront damage builds. For class and Ascendancy, we are choosing the Witch's Elementalist. This is a great class for this build as it is heavily based around elemental damage and ailments. You could also do this style of build with a Trickster as well, as he pairs nicely with damage over time and more sustain. Shaper of Desolation provides us a rotating conflux that guarantees we will apply each respective ailment when its conflux is up. However, we will be applying all ailments due to dealing all element types with various skills. Beacon of Ruin is our powerful and treasured node. This gives us guaranteed chill and shock on all targets as long as we deal damage of that element and have the chance to apply it. It also provides us elemental proliferation and more ignite damage. For our final two nodes, you could take a couple of different choices, as none of them are objectively better than one another. For my preference, I chose to grab Pendulum of Destruction for some more area or elemental damage, and Paragon of Calamity for the minor leech, defensive reductions, and reflect immunity, making mapping much more unrestrictive. You may also take the Golem nodes, but I find the Golems are very annoying to maintain and keep alive. For Ascendancy progression, I would follow this order. We grab the following keystones in the passive tree. Elemental Equilibrium. This provides a massive boost to our damage by reducing elemental resistances. Again, we will trigger this with our shield charge with an added lightning or cold damage and Orb of Storms. If we have any added fire damage of any type, that can ruin this as we will be applying a fire resistance to the enemies. Elemental Overload. This is a no-brainer as we are not going crit and provides a 40% more elemental damage to scale our ignites. Mind over Matter. As we are in the top portion of the tree and don't have any use for many auras, Mind over Matter makes for an excellent choice to add more effective life to the build. Here's the complete endgame passive tree. Defensively, we are grabbing all of the life and mana nodes that we can get, along with some regen and jewel sockets. Offensively, we get the generic fire, elemental, and burning damage nodes. We will socket one Rolling Flames jewel in the socket just below the witch to provide more area of effect for our fireballs. This jewel can go in any socket of the build except for the top left socket preceded by the elemental damage nodes. I would follow this tree progression into the final tree. For bandits, we will be killing all of them for the 2 passive points. Look to get Elemental Equilibrium early if you plan to level as pure Ignite, Scorching Ray, or Fireball. Useful pantheons for the build include Soul of the Brine King. This helps us avoid being chain stunned and or frozen. And of course for the miners, any of them can be chosen depending on the situation. Here are the following gem links for the build. Support gems are shown in order of importance, and gems with set level are either due to their effect not scaling with level or requirement for cast when damage taken. Now for our chest, I am choosing to use a tabula with an effective +3 to our active skill gem level. These can be ascertained through the Incursion League via the Corruption Altar. I will discuss this further in the gearing section. This is so that we can push our ignite damage up greatly, roughly about 50% more damage. So due to this, I am able to perform gem swaps of whichever color. For bosses, I will generally swap greater multiple projectiles for ignite proliferation or an empower level 4, if you are willing to spend for it. If you do not use a +3 gems tabula, then an empower will not be better damage than ignite proliferation. If you are not using a tabula at all, you can leave ignite proliferation in your main links and just swap swift affliction for greater multiple projectiles on bosses. Here you will want to socket your Scorching Ray in your helmet, as you are able to either use an Essence of Horror to craft a more elemental damage for socketed gems in a helmet, or an Elder-based helmet with burning damage support in it, or possibly have both. This is our movement skill. I put this in a set of Essence Insanity crafted gloves for more attack speed. Cold Snap will apply a large AoE of chill along with the possibility of frenzy charges on kill. This will maintain our Tempest shield and ensure that enemies are cursed with Enfeeble to reduce their damage. This setup will ensure that we quickly trigger Elemental Overload, Elemental Equilibrium, and Shocks on bosses. For the helmet, we will want to get a really nice rare helmet, hopefully getting either an Essence of Horror crafted helmet or an Elder helmet with burning damage, or possibly both. These can get expensive due to Righteous Fire being so popular, but I was able to score this bad boy for around 50 chaos. Here are some other unique options you could use. Here's the rare affix priority for the helmet. For the helmet enchantment, you can look for 40% increased fireball damage. For the body, I am making use of the ever so powerful new corruptions as well as the double corruptions from the Incursion League temples. Getting a tabula with +1 to socketed gems and +2 to socketed projectile gems, or +2 to socketed AoE gems, lets you push your fireball all the way to level 23, or 24 if you get a level 21 fireball. This is a massive amount of damage, since gem levels add a lot of base damage to our fireball. If you get a level 4 in power in here, you can push its level all the way to 28. We do lose stats on our chest, but I found the 50% more damage to make up for it, as I am in softcore. You can always make use of a single corrupted tabula, rare chest, or another unique chest if you want. Here are some other unique options. Now the Carcass Jack is mainly for the area, life, and resistances, as we do not fully benefit from the area damage. If you choose to use none of these, you may also make use of a rare body armor with the following affix priority. For gloves, we want to get a nice pair of rare gloves with life, resistances, and attack speed. You can also look for gloves crafted with Essence of Insanity to push your attack speed up on your shield charge. Ensure that you avoid getting gloves with added fire damage to attacks so that you do not mess up your elemental equilibrium with procs on shield charge. I don't recommend any unique gloves. Here is the rare affix priority. A nice pair of rare boots will be ideal here, with life, movement speed, and resistances. You can also look for boots with dexterity for your dexterity requirements. Here are some unique options. These are nice for getting more block chance if you do choose to go that route. Here is the affix priority for rare boots. For enchantments, you can look for the following. A Stygian is always a great option for the belt slot. Here we get a lot of life, resistances, and strength. With the Stygian, we are also able to socket an Abyss Jewel, and on that we can get life, onslaught, and flat, lightning, or cold damage to attacks for our elemental equilibrium. I do not recommend any unique belts. And here is the belt affix priority. Our amulet will be the Yoke of Suffering. This amulet is extremely powerful for builds that can apply multiple ailments, as enemies take 5% increased damage per ailment on them. Remember that enemies take is applied at the end of all damage modifiers with effects such as shock, so they act closer to more multipliers since you can only source so many of them. For us, stacking this with shock, this amulet provides us roughly 12% more damage and allows our fireball's fire damage to shock. I do not recommend any other unique amulets. If you choose not to use Yoke of Suffering, you could then make use of a regular rare amulet with the following affixes. For our rings, you will want to aim to get a nice pair of opal rings. Since we have so many rare items, we can easily sort out our resistances such that opals can be focused on just damage. Here you can also look to get dexterity to sort out your dexterity requirements. Again, remember to avoid flat fire damage to attacks on these. I'm not a big fan of the Ember Wake ring, as the ignite stacking makes the build more tedious for a minor DPS gain. For our weapon, we can make use of a Brightbeak for mapping to shield charge around real fast, and then of course a Doriani's Catalyst for serious bossing. It is very difficult to beat a Doriani's for damage in a build like this, especially since we cannot make use of added fire damage, negating the use of incursion scepters. For the shield, a rare will work just fine. Look for life, mana, fire damage, and resistances. There are also many Shaper and Elder mods that you can look for, such as percentage mana or life gained on block, a percentage of block applied to spells, and maximum resistances. Here are some unique options. This is mainly used for block chance to spells, as spell damage doesn't benefit our ignites, but this mod can also be found on rare Shaper shields. For our flask, we will be using the following. A Sulfur Flask for generic increased damage, as well as Consecrated Ground for 6% life regeneration while we stand on it. A Quicksilver Flask to boost our shield charge speed. A Rumi's Concoction. This flask is ideal for getting some more mitigation and block chance for straight up avoidance. A Mana Flask. You want to have this flask rolled with increased recovery rate to help top off your mana in deadly situations. A Life Flask that you want to have rolled with increased or instant recovery. Here are some other unique flask options. This is a good flask for getting some increased damage with your damage over time, but will conflict with your Enfeeble Curse as well as require you to drop either your Rumies or Sulfur. As for jewels, there is one unique jewel that you will want to use. This is the Rolling Flames that provides the base radius to our Fireball as it travels. This can be socketed in any of the jewel sockets chosen in this build, aside from the top left socket preceded by the elemental damage nodes. You can also use a Poacher's Aim if you want to improve your map clear in high density scenarios. However, I did not use this jewel. For rare jewels, I will provide the affix priority for both regular and Abyss jewels, along with example jewels that were used in my build. You will want to try and get some cast speed on jewels to make your Fireball feel nice to cast while mapping. Abyss jewels are fairly weak in this build due to the pure amount of flat damage we get, and that we do not want to ruin elemental equilibrium. However, they do have the utility of gaining Onslaught. I recommend getting an Abyss jewel with percentage chance to gain Onslaught on kill, paired with one or more of the following. Leveling this build is, well, I'm not really sure since I used 2 Poet's Pens to get through leveling within a single play session, using Fireball in one and Firestorm in the other. They are quite nice for that. If you are not leveling with Poet's Pens, I would still recommend the following uniques and skill gem progressions. Fireball doesn't really pick up until you can start using Volley, LMP, and GMP, so for now we will use Freezing Pulse. Here you may also choose to level with Pure Scorching Ray or Firestorm. From here you will just want to fill out the rest of your supporting gem setups and replace support gems in your main links with the ones in the guide. I did not level as self-cast, however I feel that this should be adequate. Remember that you can always go for a Scorching Ray and cast while channeling Fireball setup as well. Just ensure not to use Elemental Equilibrium until you decide to fully commit to self-cast Ignite Fireballs. Well now, has your itch been satiated? Have you gotten your fill of searing hot balls? Or do you crave more? I know I always do. It's a gift and a curse. All in all, I was very pleased with this Fireball character and had loads of fun playing it. It certainly is a quick and hard-hitting character that allows you to throw a lot of gear customization into it. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, Exile. And again, a big thanks to all my Patreon supporters. You guys have been donating a lot, and it means a bunch to me to have all of your support.